All right. Well, welcome to the Balance Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Karen Truesdell. Welcome, Jonathan. How are
Hi
you?
there, Karen. Yeah, thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Well, I guess for introductions, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Um, well, it's batshit crazy how I got to this point, but what I do now, the vast majority of my time is spent between one of two things, either actually seeing people in person or more and more these days over
Vir-
Zoom.
Virtually, yep, like this.
It's and helping them overcome their habits, addictions, fears, phobias, panic attacks, anxiety, whole list of things.
Mhm.
Basically, as long as it's got some kind of psychosomatic element or
Mhm.
element that's caused by or made worse by the mind,
Mhm.
then most cases I can generally help people with what people label hypnosis, but the reason I'm doing that, speech marks in the
Air
air
quotes.
for is because I say that hypnosis doesn't exist. It's just a label for using communication skills in a certain manner to emotionally and psychologically manipulate people, which people always go, the word manipulation, that's negative. It's only negative if it's used with negative intent. But in therapy, where you're intending to help somebody, that's positive intent. But yeah, of course, there are people out there, whether it be politicians, salespeople,
Mhm.
or people of even worse dubious natures that use the exact same communication techniques, but with different intent
Right.
to get different results. So that's one side, and then on the other side, I teach
Okay.
people who want to become hypnotherapists from scratch, or actually more and more these days, I get more and more people who are already diploma bearing hypnotherapists, but they went through a school of study that told them that you can't make people do things against their will with hypnosis, and told them that hypnosis isn't dangerous, and all these other things that are actually complete and utter, excuse the language, bullshit. That
Understood.
either the person teaching them hasn't got a clue what they're doing, or more often than not, the person teaching them genuinely believe that because the person who taught them led them to believe that was true. So they didn't bother doing any further out of the box study. But the truth of the matter is, you can make anyone say or do anything you want if you had nefarious intent and if you were prepared to break the law. Fortunately, law, most people don't want to break the law and do not have ill intent for people. But the fact is, it is possible. And personally, it's my view that the hypnotherapists out there who say it isn't haven't done enough study, don't know what they're talking about, or
Mhm.
are too scared to tell the truth to their clients because they think telling their clients that there are potential dangers might put them off from it. Whereas I have the direct opposite viewpoint. If people are made aware of the fact that it has been used negatively in the past, that even the CIA spent millions of dollars investigating how to use it for nefarious intent
Mhm.
in projects such as MK Ultra just after the war, and other and under other project names since. And that, for example, in England we have a thing called the Behavioural Insights Team, BIT, which is referred to in the world media as the nudge unit, because their prime task is to use emotional and psychological influence and persuasion techniques to nudge the mass populace into doing and thinking what the British government want. In America, you have similar things under different names. Interestingly, this is relevant to all I do is just I've gone off slightly off on one. I often do. In America, where MK Ultra started with the CIA after the war, The reason it was called M and then letter K ultra is because that stands for M is for mind, K is for control, but the German spelling. And the reason for that is because they smuggled a load of Germans out of Nazi Germany, including Joseph Mengele and others who committed gross atrocities, smuggled them into America on condition that they helped them do research projects out there. And that was the foundations of NASA on the space side, and MK Ultra and other MK projects that studied trauma-based mind control techniques that are used, things that they learn are used to this day in the advertising world, are used by governments, politicians, the media to manipulate, influence, and persuade and control people. And MK Ultra was done in America, but it was done in conjunction with the Tavistock Hospital in London, England. That after they'd done these trauma-based mind control studies, morphed into the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. Now it's just known as the Tavistock Institute if people search it on Google, where they use very eloquent language to make it sound all innocent and that it's just a psychological research institute. But if you look into the history of it, that's just their nice public website front for the fact that most of their work is linked in with people like governments, and they are linked in with the behavioural insights team. And it all comes back to the fact that there is way more people out there, way more organisations using what can also be termed as hypnosis, but I just prefer to, it doesn't matter whether you call it hypnosis, neurolinguistic programming, positive affirmations, advertising, suggestion. It doesn't matter what label you give it. It's all commonality is the intent is to persuade, influence, control, nudge, whatever your word you want to use, other human beings to do certain things. Us therapists tend to only be doing that with positive intent to help people overcome issues in their life and become the best possible them. There's actually way more people out there using it for what I would label nefarious purposes to keep people blind from the fact that, you know, the reason they voted a certain way was because maybe a company such as Cambridge Analytica, there's a Netflix documentary on them that people can check out that just scrapes the surface, but it'll open your eyes to it. They're considered to be a military-grade psychological warfare weapon by the British and American governments, and yet that company used social media platforms throughout the Trump presidential campaign, throughout the Brexit vote, to influence, manipulate, and control people into doing what they wanted, which is to get the outcome that they wanted, that the money people wanted. So another element of what I do is to try and wake people up to the fact this is going on in the world. There are dangers to these techniques. It's more so when you're not aware of them, because obviously if you're not aware of them, you might not be looking out for them, and you might fall into that trap of blindlessly, like a sleepwalking zombie, just believing anything any authority figure tells you. And the truth is, you should never blindly believe anything any authority figure tells you, and that includes me. So don't believe a word I'm saying. Go and independently research it.
Well, tell us how would you help someone with an addiction?
Okay, I mean, well, I'll tell you, the answer to that is the answer to how I'd help people with anything. Okay. And the reason for that is after 34, fast approaching 34 years of doing this, I started when I was 14. I became the youngest ever certified member of the Association of Professional Hypnotherapists and Psychotherapists here in England. And I've been treating people ever since. And what I've discovered over that time, and then tested out to try and prove myself wrong, and by not being able to prove myself wrong, convinced myself further that this conclusion's probably right, given that it's worked, is that it doesn't matter whether it's a habit, an addiction, a fear, a phobia. whether it's panic attacks, anxiety, whether it's depression, whether it's post-traumatic stress disorder, if it's anything that's manifesting itself in a negative, an external manifestation in a negative manner to the client, then the reason for that is always the same and yet different at the same time. It's an oxymoron. It'll make more sense. It'll make more sense in a minute. What I discovered is this. It's my conclusion that every human being on this planet, to function as the best possible them that they could possibly be, without habits, without fears, without addictions, without negative stress, because some stress is actually good, but without negative stress and anxiety and that little voice in the head, imposter syndrome going, without all the negative shit, the only way that that is possible is if a human being feels, and the bizarre thing in feelings are something internal. They're also purely illusionary and made up sometimes because they only exist for you, the individual.
Right.
And your idea of feeling happy, it could be entirely different to somebody else's. There's no way of knowing that
it's subjective.
The same. Exactly. So with that caveat in mind, human beings need to feel loved, wanted, needed, appreciated, cared for, cherished, and valued. Now, to a lot of people, those things sound very similar, but they're not. If you get a thesaurus and check out the meanings, and the words again are loved, wanted, needed, appreciated, cared for, cherished, and valued. Some apply to self-confidence, some to self-image, some to self-esteem, some to self-control, aka willpower. So, if from birth, when we're born as blank canvases, and unless we've got a physical or disability or brain damage, we're essentially, putting the male, female, or whatever you wish to identify as aside, we're essentially born the same. There is obviously an element of our environment and upbringing that contributes to things, but essentially we're all the same when we're born. What makes the difference is what number of and what level of traumas we may experience from birth until around Sigmund Freud, aka Sigmund Freud, said the formative years were birth to 7 years of age. Personally, I think it's actually birth till about puberty. And the reason I say that is because it's not until around puberty, thereabouts, that the executive function of the brain tends to kick in, which also gets termed by some people as the critical faculty or analytical area. So up to that point, things can get into our personal laptop computers, as I call it, the unconscious, subconscious, imagination area, without too much critical or analytical analysis, without too much filtering. And that can be good, but also it can be bad. And by traumas, incidentally, I don't mean necessarily somebody being abused or bullied or experiencing violence or
trauma. Yeah,
exactly. But that can include things that, as an adult might go, if I told them, this happening when you were younger could be affecting you now and could be an underlying thing causing you to have a habit or addiction. And if I was to say that to them, that as a 3-year-old, you were at a party, because I've seen a video, your parents showed me, whatever, how I knew is irrelevant. But you were at a party and you were playing with a red balloon and somebody walked past you, accidentally knocked you, you fell onto that red balloon, it burst, you cried your eyes out, the adults thought it's because the balloon had made a big noise, but that's affecting you now. Most adults would go, that's ridiculous. But the thing is, to that 3-year-old, that probably wasn't a red balloon. That 3-year-old could have decided that that balloon had become a magical fairy kingdom castle that was full of little fairies. And then when it burst, it destroyed the magical fairy kingdom castle and killed all the fairies. So to that 3-year-old, something that as an adult we'd laugh at, to that 3-year-old's mind and perception, that was as traumatic as to us as an adult losing a loved one in a car crash.
Mm-hmm.
And I call them mini traumas because as an adult, we'd look at them and go, that's ridiculous. But at that moment in time, developmental growing up, whether 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, our perceptions were different. So it was traumatic to what would be then at that time massive, but now we'd call it mini. But it doesn't matter. That's gone into the laptop, the neck-top computer, the unconscious, subconscious. There's a kind of frozen in time trauma that was never resolved. And there'll be dozens, if not hundreds of these apparently daft little things as you're growing up, that we're not consciously aware of as adults, but they're slowing down that neck-top computer. It's like viruses running on your laptop because there was no mental antivirus, there was no critical faculty analytical area.
Children take everything personally.
Yeah. So it's all gone in there. So the stuff that's affecting you as an adult, that unless you've done some work with a therapist or on yourself to get in there and delete all the negative shit and install metaphoric antivirus software for the brain, unless you've done that, then there's still going to be shit in there that's holding you down, and feelings that you're not even consciously aware of: self-blame, shame, guilt, regret, fear, frustration, failure, anger, anguish, anxiety, resentment, regret, remorse, all these negative things in there. And as well as those mini traumas, at some point, the feeling of experiencing those mini traumas is likely to have a negative impact on to what level that individual felt loved, wanted, needed, appreciated, cared for, cherished, or valued, which in turn will have had a knock-on effect on their self-confidence, self-image, self-esteem, and self-control, aka willpower, which in turn has a knock-on effect on their levels of self-worth, self-love, self-respect, and positive selfishness, that ability to look after themselves, to then be
put themselves first. Yes.
Yeah. And that in turn ultimately will impact their sense of self, their self-identity. So it will feel as though something is missing, out of balance. And that's the key to any habit, addiction, fear, or phobia, because if the person felt fully loved, wanted, needed, appreciated, cared for, cherished, and valued at this deep, unconscious, subconscious, neck-top computer level, then the programs that will be running will be balanced, harmonious, positive, and there would be no imbalance on their self-confidence, self-esteem, self-image, and self-control. And in turn, there couldn't be any imbalance on their self-love, self-respect, self-worth, and positive selfishness. And in turn, there'd be nothing missing, there'd be no gap, they'd feel whole, they'd feel balanced. So the key to any issue, habit, addiction, fear, phobia, or depression, which is often living too much in the past, fearing that negativity that happened in the past will happen again, or anxiety, panic attacks, example, it's living in the future, the fear that something bad's going to happen that never does, is to get into that personal neck-top computer, process all those mini traumas, and you don't have to mind rape people. I'm not on about reliving things. I'm to talk them over. I mean, what I'm talking about here are things that people probably could never talk over anyway, because they consciously probably wouldn't recollect them.
Yeah,
exactly. But we can use abstract, because the unconscious, subconscious imagination works on abstract imagery, abstract processes, to allow the amygdala in the brain to process these mini traumas in a non-traumatic fashion, so that they're no longer holding you down. It's like letting go of all that emotional baggage. And then also we can use self-healing techniques. One of the biggest one I do is helping people to metaphorically heal their inner child, but not in the way that some inner child approaches do, because some of them have people bawling their eyes out way too much and unnecessarily almost reliving the traumas. No, this is just, yes, there are often tears, but they're kind of tears of relief and joy and happiness and optimism that finally that inner child feels loved, wanted, needed, appreciated, cared for, cherished and valued, that knocks onto everything else that I've said previously. To then, having dealt with the past shit, then I'll also kind of be able to metaphorically install antivirus software for the brain, for that computer, to then come back out, let the nightclub bouncer of the brain, the critical faculty, analytical area, executive function, call it what you will, go back to doing its job, i.e. to stop negative shit getting in without it being critically analysed, which you're now in a position to do as an adult,
right,
where
but
you
not
weren't
as a child.
before.
As a child, you just take it all in. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, that what the processes I would use, one of which is the inner child thing. I give people a big cushion or a pillow to hold so that while their eyes are closed and they've gone through what they call a hypnotic induction, effectively just closing their eyes, breathing deeply and going through a relaxation technique to get the nightclub dormant of the mind to go, you know what, I feel safe. The intent of this is to help me. I don't need to be on duty. I can go for a coffee break, allowing access to the laptop computer. And I have them imagine talking to the 1-year-old, then 2-year-old, 3-year-old, and I go through all the years to teenage and tell the little them that they're imagining in their mind's eye in a way that feels right for them. But it's made easier to do because of the multi-sensory experience of holding the pillow. Give them a hug. Say, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly flick as we're talking about this to the correct page, and I will read it. There we go. Making peace with and healing your inner child. I use elements of what's called I can never say this, so I apologize to anyone who's aware of the Hawaiian love and forgiveness ritual, Ho'oponopono. Ho'oponopono.
Okay.
Pronounced something like that. It's spelled H-O apostrophe in the air, O-P-O-N-O-P-O-N-O. Ho'oponopono. I might have got it right, actually.
Maybe. That sounds pretty good to me.
But it's the Hawaiian love and forgiveness ritual. And but with the added element of imagining you're holding on to the mini you. And in your mind's eye, you imagine saying to the young you at different ages, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. That's the elements of the Ho'oponopono prayer. However, I've added to that.
Very simple and sweet.
Very, very simple, but actually, when you get the pillow or the cushion, close your eyes, imagine yourself at that age, very emotionally moving, and it has a profound impact, especially when you have the extra elements I've added of these statements. I'm here for you now. It's not your fault. You are not to blame. I'm proud of you. Everything's going to be okay now. And you do this through the different ages. And I cannot express how and to make it easy, in my book, I put a QR code that people can just scan, and it takes them to a video where I talk them through this. So I guide them through it and give them the mental visualization to follow. So it makes it easier to really get into the psychosensory experience. And that helps the amygdala process the negative traumas, because the little child at each age then doesn't feel scared anymore or rejected or attacked. It feels loved, wanted, needed, appreciated, cared for, cherished and valued. And therefore it has the positive knock-on effect or ripples through all the other things, as I explained earlier. So that's just one of the things. And then obviously positive reframing of things and positive affirmations and suggestions. I get people to see themselves in the future as the confident, happy, healthy, relaxed non-smoker they have now become and continue to be from this moment forward. Or I may get them to imagine themselves in a full-length mirror, looking at themselves and feeling proud and fantastic at how they've become the perfect them, looking exactly the way they've always wanted to look, because they found it easy to avoid those sugary and fatty foods and the
best version of themselves.
Exactly, yeah, which is the key to all of it.
Yeah. Did you write that? Do you have a book? How do people find you to learn more about
you? This book my latest book and the best one. So forget the other books. Unless you
Okay.
want to become I know that sounds bizarre, but I am genuinely saying from a self-help point of view, forget my other self-help books, don't buy them. Yeah, this is better than all my other self-help books put together. And it's cheaper. It's called Shitnosis, helping you get over the shit in your life and get your shit together. Yes, it's got a lot of adult-themed
humor,
metaphors in there and humor, but laughter's the best medicine. Unless you're diabetic, then insulin often works better. But I mean, for example, we teach you the SCAT process, subconsciously charged analytical tapping. This is my version of meridian tapping therapies. And the shithead protocol, subconscious human interaction therapy, helping everyone achieve destiny. This is a way of bypassing the critical faculty and having a conversation with your own unconscious, subconscious mind and getting idiomotor responses. So one finger becomes the yes answer, one becomes no, one becomes maybe, one becomes don't know. And you can actually ask your own unconscious mind questions, and without any conscious physical effort on your part, you'll be amazed when the finger that's for yes or no just ever so slightly moves or twitches. And you can then ask your unconscious to reprogram that computer. That's one of the many techniques. It's tons of techniques. And it's the grand total of 17 United States dollars. And there's dozens of them QR code things in there.
With link to videos.
People scan them and they go to videos where I taught them through what they've read in the book, but also demonstrate it. Because some people are visual, learn well from reading. Others need to hear it explained to them. Others need to see it demonstrated.
Learners,
yeah. So I cover all the bases, because that way then, whichever's most relevant to the reader, it's covered for them. And also I give, for most things, I give 2 different techniques, or at the very least, I give the information on how to use it differently, depending on whether you are the critical, skeptical, analytical, logical type of person, naturally, or if you're at the other end of the scale where you're the very creative, emotional type of person. Obviously, there's levels in between that, but there's 2 main distinct things. And the thing is, books that are aimed at the emotional, creative types, the techniques that are in there, don't tend to work for the logical types, and vice versa, which is why some self-help books don't work for people. Whereas in here, if a technique doesn't work for you, then, well, you won't have failed. You'll have succeeded in discovering that you're not that type of person, the way you're wired up, the way you operate. So use the other type of techniques instead. Yeah.
Okay, very good. All right. Well, thank you so much for all. I mean, that's quite a lot of information, and your book looks amazing.
A lot of information. It's a bit, and yet simplistic at the same time. When once it's processed through your mind, you'll probably end up, at first it's, what the heck's he on about? But when you watch this or listen to it again, people, I promise you, then you'll end up going, hang on a minute, can it actually be as simple as what he's actually just said? Because it's both simplistic and complicated at the same time.
Okay, very good. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. So good.
Thank you very much indeed, Karen.
And
thank you, viewers and listeners. Please share this everywhere, like it, make comments, and that way people can learn more about Karen's show.
Yeah, absolutely will do. Thank you.